I don't know why you're making such a big deal about this. It's not like we ever needed your help anyway. My brother David spat, his words slicing through the phone line with practiced precision. I stood in my kitchen, clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. 3 years of school pickups, emergency babysitting, midnight fevers, and homework help condensed into that single dismissal. The timer on my oven beeped. The lasagna I'd prepared for his kids' dinner tomorrow was ready. Old habits. I gave everything, I whispered, more to myself than to him. What? I can't hear you when you mumble like that. I cleared my throat, feeling the familiar tightness that preceded tears. Nothing. I've got to go. So that's it? You're just abandoning us because you suddenly decided you have better things to do? The accusation landed exactly as intended, piercing the soft, vulnerable parts of me still desperate for his approval. For anyone's approval, really. I closed my eyes, recalling Dr. Winter's words from therapy last week. Your worth isn't determined by how useful you are to others. I'm not abandoning anyone, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. I'm finally showing up for myself and my kids. There's a difference. I hung up before he could respond, something I'd never have dared do 6 months ago. Progress happens in small rebellions, I was learning. In the quiet kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of my caretaking, neatly labeled containers, color-coded calendar, emergency contact lists, I finally allowed the tears to come. The first time David asked me to watch the kids was 6 years ago, when Lily was barely walking and James still in diapers. Their mother had left suddenly, a hasty note explaining she needed it to find herself, the only goodbye. I remember the desperation in my brother's eyes when he showed up at my door at 5 a.m., children half asleep in their car seats, his uniform wrinkled. I can't miss this shift, Emma. They'll fire me, just until I figure something out. That temporary solution stretched into weeks, then months, then years. I rearranged my work schedule, trading my full-time position as a graphic designer for freelance contracts I could complete while supervising homework or during nap times. My own children, Sophie and Marcus, teenagers with their own needs, learned to adapt around their cousin's presence in our home. You're a lifesaver, David would say, dropping off lunch money or picking up the kids. I don't know what I'd do without you. The praise felt good. Being needed felt good. Growing up in our household, approval had been currency, and I'd always been bankrupt while David flourished. Now, for once, I was the capable one, the essential one. I'd spent my childhood as an afterthought in our family. Dad left when I was 4, David 7, and Mom poured everything into making sure David, the boy, the reminder of Dad, the future, had every opportunity. His baseball games were family events. My art competitions went unattended. His academic struggles warranted tutors. My straight A's were expected. David's needs were emergencies. Mine were inconveniences. When David graduated high school, Mom took a second mortgage to send him to college. When I graduated 2 years later, she handed me a card that read, "Smart girls like you can always find scholarships." I did find scholarships, and I worked 2 jobs through college, and I married Tom right after graduation because he was stable and kind and saw me when no one else did. We had Sophie when I was 23, Marcus 2 years later. Tom took a corporate job that required constant travel but provided the financial security I'd never known growing up. "You've got this, Em," he'd say, kissing me goodbye for another 3-week trip. "You're the most capable woman I know." Another compliment that felt like validation and burden simultaneously. I wore my competence like armor, never letting anyone see the exhaustion or loneliness underneath. Then Tom's company opened an office in Singapore, and he was offered a position too good to refuse. Our marriage, already stretched thin by distance, couldn't survive the additional strain. The divorce was amicable but devastating, not because I still loved him, but because I'd failed at the one thing I'd prided myself on, building a stable family, unlike the fragmented one I'd grown up in. I was 32, single with 2 children, when David appeared at my door that early morning. His need gave me purpose when I felt most adrift. "Of course I'll help," I promised. "That's what family does." The criticism began so subtly I barely noticed it. James's teacher mentioned he didn't have his permission slip. "Did you forget to check his folder?" A slight edge to the question. "Sophie was pretty rude to Lily yesterday. You might want to talk to her about respecting family." A furrowed brow. Marcus leaves his stuff all over my house when you drop them off. Don't you teach your kids to clean up after themselves? A heavy sigh. Each comment planted seeds of doubt. Was I failing my own children? Was I prioritizing my niece and nephew over them? The irony wasn't lost on me. I was simultaneously too involved in my brother's family and supposedly neglecting my own. I began waking earlier, staying up later, trying to perfect every aspect of our complicated arrangement. I created elaborate systems: meals prepped on Sundays, homework stations for each child, color-coded calendars for activities. I transformed myself into a machine of efficiency, believing if I just tried harder, worked smarter, no one would have reason to criticize. The complaints continued anyway, joined by commentary from my mother during her monthly visits. David says you've been unreliable lately, she mentioned while I served her tea, having just returned from dropping all 4 kids at their respective activities, with a work deadline looming that evening. He needs to know he can count on you, Emma. He's had it so rough since Carolyn left. I nodded, swallowing the defense that rose in my throat. I've had it rough too, I wanted to say. Who can I count on? But I knew the answer. In our family, I was the giver, not the receiver of support. That dynamic was established long before David's children entered the picture. I'll try harder, I promised, the words bitter on my tongue. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, but my mind raced with to-do lists, worries, the constant calculation of how to stretch myself even thinner. I crept downstairs, made a cup of tea, and sat at the kitchen table. In the dim light, I noticed Sophie's sketchbook left open. I shouldn't have looked. Privacy was something I tried to respect, even in our crowded, chaotic household. But a drawing caught my eye, a figure I recognized as me, but with 8 arms like a Hindu goddess, each hand holding something different. A phone, a spatula, a briefcase, a child's hand. My face in the drawing was blank, just an empty oval where features should be. The image hit me with physical force. Was this how my daughter saw me? A faceless caretaking machine? When had she last seen me truly laugh or cry or express any emotion not carefully modulated for others' comfort? Sophie approached me one evening the following week while I was folding David's kids' laundry. "Mom, I got into the art program," she said quietly, leaning against the doorframe. "That's great, honey." I smiled, continuing to match tiny socks. "I told you about it last week," she added, her voice wavering slightly. "The application was due today. I needed you to sign the permission form." My hands froze mid-fold. "I don't remember." "I left it on your desk with a note." She shrugged, her practiced indifference betrayed by the hurt in her eyes. "It's fine. Mrs. Collins let me submit it late when I explained." When she left, I sat surrounded by laundry that wasn't mine, in a life that increasingly didn't feel like mine either. I found the application under a stack of bills on my desk, along with Sophie's handwritten note. "Mom, please sign this. It's important to me. P.S. Remember when you used to draw with me?" The memory hit me with unexpected force. Sophie at 5, sitting beside me at this very table, both of us sketching. "You make the most beautiful things, Mommy," she'd said, watching me shade a portrait of her. Back then, I'd still made time for my own creative outlets, still remembered I was a person beyond my responsibilities. That night, I searched through the storage closet until I found my old portfolio from college, untouched for years. The dust made me sneeze as I opened it, revealing drawings and designs that seemed created by a stranger, a woman with passions and dreams beyond survival and service. I pulled out my sketch pad and a pencil. For 2 hours I drew, awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence. Nothing remarkable, just the view from my window. But it felt revolutionary, like remembering a language I'd once been fluent in. When I finally went to bed, I slept without waking for the first time in months. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving. I'd spent 3 days preparing, cooking David's favorites alongside dishes his kids would actually eat. My children helped, Sophie mastering my grandmother's pie crust recipe, while Marcus set the table with surprising care. "Is Uncle David going to criticize everything again?" Marcus asked quietly, folding napkins. The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "He always finds something wrong. With the food, with the house, with us." The simple observation from my 12-year-old son crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. David's criticism wasn't about my actual failures. It was a habit, a way of maintaining the hierarchy established in our childhood. If I was flawed, he could justify his dependence on me as a favor he was granting, rather than a burden I was carrying. Not everything, I corrected gently. But yes, he can be critical sometimes. Dad says Uncle David's got a classic case of wounded male ego, Marcus said, repeating something he'd clearly overheard from Tom. He says guys like that build themselves up by putting others down. I suppressed a smile. Tom might be an absent father in many ways, but his insights could be surprisingly sharp. Your father might have a point, I admitted. But today, let's just focus on enjoying our meal together. David arrived an hour late with Lily and James, offering no explanation. Throughout dinner, he criticized the turkey, a little dry. Questioned my parenting. Marcus, does your mom let you play those violent video games? And dismissed Sophie's art school acceptance. Art doesn't pay the bills, trust me. I felt each barb differently now, seeing them as reflections of his insecurity rather than indictments of my worth. This new perspective didn't make them hurt less, but it did make me less inclined to absorb them as truth. After dessert, as I began clearing plates, David announced, "By the way, I need you to take the kids this weekend. Melissa and I are going to check out this cabin upstate." Melissa, his girlfriend of 2 months whom he'd never bothered to introduce to his children. "I can't this weekend," I said, the words emerging before I'd fully formed the thought. "Sophie has her showcase, and I promised I'd be there." The silence felt physical. Everyone froze, my children looking up in shock, David's face darkening. "Seriously? You know how hard it is for me to get time away. Melissa's been planning this for weeks." "I'm sorry," I said, not feeling sorry at all. "I have plans I can't break." "You know, Emma, you've become really selfish lately. I've noticed it, Mom's noticed it. Your kids could stand to learn that family comes first." Something snapped inside me then, a load-bearing wall finally giving way under too much weight. "Family comes first?" I laughed, the sound foreign to my own ears. "Do you have any idea what I've given up for your family? The work opportunities I've passed on? The school events I've missed for my own children? The relationships I haven't pursued because I'm always on call for you?" David's face twisted. "No one asked you to martyr yourself. If it's such a burden, you should have said something." "I'm saying it now." The words hung between us, irrevocable. Lily started crying, sensing the tension. James stared at his plate. Sophie and Marcus exchanged glances I couldn't interpret. "Kids, how about you all go watch a movie in the living room?" I suggested, my voice carefully controlled. When they left, David leaned across the table. "What's gotten into you? This isn't like you at all." "That's the problem, David. I've spent so long being who everyone needed me to be that I'm not sure I know who I am anymore. But I do know this arrangement isn't working." "So you're just going to abandon my kids? After everything?" There it was again. That word. Abandonment. The greatest sin in our family lexicon, the wound inflicted by our father that shaped all our relationships since. "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said firmly. "I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. I'll still help with Lily and James, but on terms that don't destroy me or hurt my children in the process." David pushed back from the table. "I don't have time for your middle-aged identity crisis. Some of us have real problems. The dismissal would have devastated me months ago. Now it just confirmed I was making the right decision." "Your problems are real," I acknowledged. "But they're not more real or more important than mine. That's what I'm trying to tell you." He left shortly after, taking Lily and James with him. The house felt unnaturally quiet in their absence. That night, after everyone left, I sat with Sophie and Marcus at our kitchen table. The house felt strangely quiet without the usual chaos of extra children. "I'm sorry," I told them. "I haven't been present for you the way I should have been." Marcus shrugged. "It's okay, Mom. They needed you." "You need me too," I insisted, suddenly seeing with painful clarity how I'd internalized the idea that my children were somehow less deserving of care, just as I had been in my parents' eyes compared to David. "And I need to be your mom first." Sophie looked at me for a long moment. "Is Uncle David going to hate us now?" "No, honey. He's angry right now, but he doesn't hate us. He's just used to things being a certain way. Change is hard for everyone." "Are you okay?" Marcus asked, surprising me with his perceptiveness. The question brought unexpected tears to my eyes. When was the last time someone had asked me that? Not, can you handle this? Or, could you possibly do this one more thing? But simply, are you okay? I will be, I promised, meaning it for perhaps the first time in years. The following weeks brought a storm. David left angry voicemails. Our mother called to explain how much my brother was struggling, how selfish I was being, how families should stick together. We are sticking together, I told her, meaning the three of us in my household. That's exactly what I'm doing. I established boundaries. I would help with Lily and James on specified days with clear pickup times. I declined last-minute requests. I stopped doing David's laundry, preparing meals for his freezer, cleaning his house. The accusations intensified. I was abandoning the children. I was punishing them for adult conflicts. I was being petty and resentful. Each barb stung, precisely because they targeted my deepest insecurities. Yet with each day that I drove Sophie to her art class without canceling, with each evening I spent helping Marcus with his science project, I felt my resolve strengthening. I started seeing Dr. Winters weekly instead of monthly. What you're experiencing is the discomfort of growth, she explained. Systems resist change. When you alter your role in a family system, everyone feels the disruption. Will it always be this hard? I asked. No, she promised, but it won't be linear either. There will be progress and setbacks. The important thing is to hold your center. My center was slowly taking shape. I returned to freelancing more seriously, building a portfolio of design work that reignited my creative passion. I started a small savings account for myself, something separate from the household funds, a concrete symbol of my growing independence. I took Sophie and Marcus on a weekend trip to the coast, just the three of us. Watching them run along the shore, I realized with a pang how much I'd missed of their growing up while managing everyone else's emergencies. You seem different, Mom, Sophie observed as we collected shells at sunset. Different how? She considered this seriously. More, here, like you're actually in your body instead of thinking about 50 other things. Her insight startled me. Is that good or bad? Good, she said decisively. Definitely good. 6 months later, David showed up unannounced on a Tuesday evening. I was helping Sophie with college applications, maps and brochures spread across our dining table. Can we talk? He asked, hands shoved in his pockets. I hesitated, then nodded at Sophie. Give us a few minutes. When she left, David sat heavily at the table. I hired a nanny, he said, part-time. Melissa moved in and she helps too. That's good, I said carefully. Look, He stared at his hands. I didn't realize how much you were doing until you stopped. I just assumed you were available because you always were. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but from David, it was monumental. The kids miss you, he added, not as the babysitter, as their aunt. Something warm bloomed in my chest, tender and cautious. I miss them too. Maybe you could come over Sunday? Just to visit. No childcare expectations. I nodded. I'd like that. We sat in silence for a moment, decades of family dynamics swirling between us. I thought of all the things unsaid, how our childhood shaped us both, how I enabled his dependence as much as he took advantage of my need for approval, how we were both products of patterns established long before we had any say in the matter. I'm not the same person I was, I said finally. I can't go back to how things were. I know. He looked up, meeting my eyes. Mom's furious with me, by the way. Says I drove you away with my ingratitude. I couldn't help but laugh. That's unexpected. He shrugged. She's not entirely wrong. I didn't appreciate what I had until it was gone. Story of my life, I guess. In that moment, I glimpsed the wounded boy beneath the entitled man, the child who lost his father, then his wife, whose deepest fear was that everyone would eventually abandon him. It didn't excuse his behavior, but it helped me see him with compassion rather than resentment. We'll figure it out, I offered. A new normal. After he left, I found Sophie in her room, sketching. Everything okay? She asked without looking up. Getting there, I said, sitting beside her on the bed. Your uncle invited us over this weekend, just to spend time together. She considered this, pencil pausing. Are you going back to how things were before? No, I said firmly. Never. But we're finding a new way forward, one where everyone's needs matter, including yours, especially yours. She leaned against my shoulder, the gesture so reminiscent of her childhood that my heart ached. I'm proud of you, Mom, she whispered. Those 5 words healed something deep within me, a wound so old I'd forgotten it was there. In trying to earn the approval I'd been denied as a child, I'd nearly missed the most important approval of all, my own children's, and ultimately, my own. On Sunday, we visited David's house. It was messier than when I managed it, but also more alive. Lily showed me her science project. James taught Marcus a new video game. David barbecued while Melissa made a salad. Nobody pretended it wasn't awkward, but beneath the awkwardness was something authentic, family finding its way back to each other on new terms. As the sun set, David walked me to my car. You were right, he said abruptly, about me taking you for granted, about a lot of things. I smiled. I know. He laughed, surprised. When did you get so confident? When I stopped outsourcing my worth to other people's opinions, I answered honestly. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in years. 3 simple truths I was finally ready to embrace. My worth is not measured by how much I give until I break. My children deserve the best of me, not what's left over. Love with boundaries is not selfish. It's the only sustainable kind of love there is. The path ahead wouldn't be perfect. Old habits and family patterns have deep roots. But as I closed my journal, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of invisible labor finally seen, acknowledged, and most importantly, redistributed to where it belonged. The next morning, I woke early, made coffee, and set up my drawing materials at the kitchen table. When Sophie came downstairs and found me sketching, her surprise turned to delight. Can I join you? She asked. I pulled out a chair beside me, making space for her, making space for myself, in a life that finally felt like my own.